This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Total American student debt, student loan debt, $1.4 trillion. 2015-2016 school year, the average debt at graduation for students receiving bachelor's degrees was north of $30,000. Also, parents' debt has gone up about 14% over the last 5 years, the 5-year study through the 2015-2016 school year, to $33,291. Something for you to look forward to with Peyton and Eli.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
It's great. You'll have the rest of your life to pay it off. Won't that be fun?
Won't they have to pay it off? I never.
Well, you don't. Yeah,
paid. I mean, I got one.
You're not required by law to finance their college education.
But I had up one semester from my family, and then the rest I had to pay myself. I had to pay my student loans, and I worked. I worked as a waitress for 4 years at Sports Column just to have money, and then that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
So why do I mean, do you have to pay for your kids to go to college?
No, you don't. In fact,
why would I want to waste $200,000 all said and done for what?
Well, there's a predicate question. Should your kids go to college at all?
Or should they go straight into the trades or now straight into the military? Because they're getting a taste of that this week.
Well, let me give you an example of what's happening, what college campuses are producing. Let me introduce you to the de facto head of the Democratic Party in this country. Her name is Alexandria Acacio Cortes. She won that Democrat congressional primary. She's going to be a member of Congress come January. This is an interview that she gave on the new Firing Line show with Margaret Hoover about the Middle East.
Oh, boy. She's 28 years old, keep in mind.
Boston University grad.
But I am, of course, the dynamic there in terms of geopolitics and the war in the Middle East is very different than people expressing their First Amendment right to protest.
Well, yes, but I also think that what people are starting to see, at least in the occupation of Palestine, is just an increasing crisis of humanitarian condition. And that, to me, is just where I tend to come from on this issue.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
Oh
my gosh. That's so fun.
I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing in some of these areas and places where Palestinians are experiencing difficulty in access to their housing and homes.
Do you think you can expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd also just...
No, I don't think
I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue.
Oh, thanks for that grand concession.
Down for that interview in the first place. Oh, my gosh, like watching a horror film through your hand. You just want it to stop.
I know some words. I know like West Bank and settlements and Palestinians and Yasser Arafat and the PLO and...
what was she saying? The occupation of
Abbas and Netanyahu. So I'm just going to do like a word jumble and then just kind of social justice emote my answer on the topic. This is why our friend Jason Hill, philosophy professor over at DePaul, is suggesting to not fund dear old alma mater, to walk away, to go galt, as it were, from higher education. Our universities risk losing their status as learning sites and becoming national security threats, writes Hill. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Jason Hill, who's got a new book out, I'll have you know. And let me just get that up here for you so I can properly promote Jason Hill's new book. It's an immigrant story, We Have Overcome, and it's an immigration story to an immigration letter to the American people, who is Jason Hill is an immigrant from Jamaica. Jason, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan and Amy. Good
morning.
Good morning.
Universities risk becoming national security threats. That's pretty strong language. What do you mean?
Well, I mean that they are becoming propaganda machines. They've been that way for a while. They've become propaganda machines. They've ceased to become objective learning centers where they disseminate knowledge objectively. and dispassionately to their students, and they have become propaganda machines where they do the very same thing that Alexandria Cortes, we heard her doing, where what they do is they really indoctrinate their students in the humanities and the social sciences. And we find it happening now in the law schools with a steady dose, a steady diet of radical left-wing ideology. They're basically indoctrinating their students into left-wing ideology, socializing them into becoming socialists, where cultural Marxism is the basic ideological trope through which all knowledge is filtered, whether it's philosophy, whether it's literature. The literature departments are the worst. Whether it's history, everything is read through a cultural Marxist lens. And a cult of victimology, a cult of ideology, is the dominant trope through or schema through which you are meant to view yourself and view society as, and especially America, as an imperialistic, intrinsically, irrevocably racist, unjust society. And to do that, you have to dispense with reason. You have to dispense with argumentation. You have to shut down free speech, basically. And we're seeing this increasingly across campus, where it's the radical left that is predominantly the enemy of free speech. Because you can't have open contestation and debate of these stupid, nefarious ideas if you have free speech.
Well, are there any college campuses or universities that still where free speech is still alive?
I mean, I think there are a couple of colleges. I think colleges like Hillsdale and a couple religious universities that paradoxically, ironically, you would think religious universities would be the ones that would be inimical to this kind of approach. But I think there are probably a handful of universities that are still open to free speech. But I think even those, the important thing, Amy, is that even those universities that might be amenable to free speech are caving into student pressure themselves, because these students have a sense of, they live in these curated silos, however you pronounce it. In a different country, I can never get the pronunciation right. These curated silos where they have never heard perspectives outside of their own. And where increasingly their professors are not giving them a different perspective or a balanced perspective. And university administrators who are well-intentioned people who probably would like to have them hear a different perspective, cave into the students and the professoriate perspectives and shut down free speech. I was just speaking to an administrator from a university recently who said, we want to have intellectual diversity, but when the vetting process begins and we have students and professors from these different departments, all hell breaks loose. So you have a speaker like Condoleezza Rice, who is really, at the vetting process, declared to be a hate speaker.
Yeah.
Now, there's no lower place to go in educational hell, I think, when someone like Condoleezza Rice, who's actually quite a moderate, on the conservative spectrum, is classified as a hate speaker.
Well, and you're suggesting that this is beyond salvaging, that university grads should defund their alma maters, that the only way that you're going to see structural change, cultural change on the college campus is for the universities to pay an economic price.
Yeah, in my book, We Have Overcome, I have an immigrant's letter to the American people. I have a huge section in there where I just gave a small version of the article, but in the book I go into a great deal where I really make an appeal to businessmen and women and alumni donors and to the federal government, because private universities also receive funding, that stop funding your destroyers. Unless you pay an economic price, there's no incentive for the professoriate and for these students who are the mouthpieces really of their professors to stop mouthing these kinds of conceptual inanities really that don't match up with the intellectual world. We continue to incentivize them to condemn the hands that feed them, business people, corporate organizations, And until they can really, universities can really hire, professors who have alternative viewpoints and not incidentally fire professors or deny them tenure or scare the wits out of them, those professors who will teach alternative viewpoints in their classrooms, then there will be no solution. There will be no alternative, really.
But if we defund DePaul, there will be no philosophy professor Jason Hill. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Well, it's not just. I don't want to single out my own university here because I mean, it's I don't mean to use my university as and I'm not using my university as an example.
Although your university hasn't been great in the last couple of years.
Well, I think what will happen very quickly is that universities are not, although they are traditionally nonprofit institutions. I think what will happen is that we will see a restructuring very, very quickly because.
So that they'll reinstate chalk on the campus of DePaul that's been banned, for example.
It's not that they'll reinstate chalk. I think what we'll see very happening once a defunding and disbanding happening is that from a top-down perspective, from the perspective of the presidency, the provost, and the deanships, that we will see massive restructuring happening very, very quickly. And the issue is once alumni donors start stipulating that as a condition of the endowments that I'm making, that you have to hire or you have to affix. The money that is being donated is not unconditional. That you have to teach conservative values, you have to teach American values, you have to teach pro-capitalist values, you have to teach values that espouse individualism, self-reliance, the morality of wealth creation, pro-American values. You see, very often these corporations just give them money without any kind of conditions affixed to them. I think once we have something like that happening, you would see a radical change in universities. And you'd still see a Jason Hill at DePaul very, very quickly because universities are not going to lose their top talent that quickly.
There you go. Top talent, Jason Hill. No question about it. Philosophy professor at DePaul, Jason Hill, the book, We Have Overcome, An Immigrant's Letter to the American People. Jason, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
And also you can get a long-form interview, more of Jason's reflections. He sat down for an Against the Current interview at upstream-ideas.com several months back. A really good conversation with Jason Hill. More information from him at that site.
And Dr. Hill joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.